Don in London, hello. October the 3rd, part of our Indian summer here in the UK. My video is all about recovery from addiction to either substance or behaviour. My addictive substance, alcohol, my behaviour could be equally addictive around people, places and things. So a lot of changes in my life. From being an addict, alcoholic, addicted to substances and behaviour. And I don't know that it's an easy admission when we first get into recovery. Now I look back, just thinking about it in that moment, how difficult was it for me to understand that I was addicted to anything, let alone addicted to something else as well, besides alcohol? And what was it like to become an addict or alcoholic moving into recovery? Well, it was extremely difficult now I look back. And I didn't want to tell you about it, and I didn't want anybody to know. So the very idea that I could find somewhere where anonymity was sacrosanct, that is, me sharing the truth of who I am, an alcoholic in recovery, sober one day at a time, was a bit of a shock. It was okay to tell the truth at last, and what a relief. I think not, to start with, because that admission and acceptance of being something I never wanted to be, and to be involved with people who were like me, still not sure what it was to be an addict, and certainly not sure about letting people know what it is to be an addiction. But the good news is, it's not so much stigmatised today. That is, people understand that there is such a thing as addiction, and it can apply to anyone. And that's what I found out. Addiction applies to anyone, anywhere, who finds themselves in it. And if you had a choice, you wouldn't be an addict or an alcoholic or anything with an olic or an ism attached to it, probably, simply because it means we are powerless over some sort of behaviour, and we can't do anything about it. After all, we are all given freedom of choices and self-will and willpower, and when willpower fails and we can't stop doing something which is harming ourselves, and nobody else can understand it either, close to us, because they have no experience of it, what on earth are we to do? Well, I hid my problem for years, from myself as much as anybody. It was better to be in ignorance of something. Although I knew there was something wrong, I didn't want to admit it, because alcohol worked for me. It worked taking the pain out of life, and it worked because it made me feel happy enough when happiness was on offer. So deluded and ignorant to a large extent, because I preferred it that way. I wasn't going to go looking at me when I had enough to do, dealing with my career and trying to find the right girl and get married and have a family and do all the things that normal people do, whatever normal people do these days. But actually, I never found out what was normal for me, because it was better to pretend to be okay, and then people would leave me alone to my situation and I could work it out for myself. So self-will did work for a long, long time to keep me in the big picture of life, and the big picture of life was being with the right people in the right place, doing the right things, wanting the right things, and doing the right things, at least according to the norms or the normal people that I associated with, often very hard drinkers, very successful, career oriented, always looking to improve the current situation with a better situation. So is it any wonder that if we're paralysed by trying to do the right thing, trying to be a part of, trying to be included, show no fear, put on a brave face, have a stiff upper lip, as the British say, don't show what's really going on, we can get on with the mechanical side of life, looking right and hoping we feel right as a consequence. So a lot of thinking invested in looking right, when indeed it would have been better to say, how am I feeling? Why? What can I do? And most of the time, if I'd actually known what my feelings were and they weren't suppressed, I was fearful, angry, resentful at probably not finding out what I could do in life, but just doing what I thought I ought to do based on what the situation was just then. So I don't have any anger and resentment about any of that now, because I found recovery one day at a time, and into sobriety. So I've put sobriety first, so the rest of my life can work, so I can learn my feelings and emotions on a daily basis and live in the moment of now, which is where apparently, according to most people, spiritual life happens. It always happens in the now, and in the current moment it's always imperfectly perfect, because if it were perfect all the time, there'd be nothing to do. It would be a stagnation of life. Maybe, I don't know. But life is forever changing, and we are powerless over much of what is going on around us. Other people, places and things, we don't have power over them as such, but we do have the power to make free choices if we're sober. We know how we feel about life, and we can do something about it in the moment of now. And I found that I joined in with a fellowship which was beyond my understanding. Alcoholics Anonymous, a fellowship of men and women dedicated to being sober, so the rest of their lives could work out as life can be, happy or sad, in the moment of now. And I wasn't a great joiner of anything in life except joining in to make money, joining in to the next party, and trying to enjoy all that was available. So continually frustrated by not having enough, and certainly not feeling good enough often to be a part of what was going on. So no let up in trying to fit in, no let up allowing myself to enjoy what was going on just right now. And when I didn't feel quite right, or I needed to take the edge off, alcohol was always there. My best friend in life for many a year, probably about 35 years indeed, at least 35 years, because I had the example of how it worked for people in family and outside family. It made them happy and silly often, or just gave them oblivion from the horror of the current situation. So alcohol indeed kept me going when nothing else would, and it was always a barrier between me and me finding out who I was, allowing my feelings to emerge. But it also was a barrier and a boundary between work life and the type of work I did, which was very intensive around helping people or helping organisations grow, be bigger, stronger, fitter, more profitable. And the same goes for people too. Always looking for the next edge, if you like. Competitive edge? Yes. I suspect that's what it was. Competing, and I was competing with myself, of course. If I could do that last year, what could I do this year? How could I improve? What skills could I find? What more knowledge could I get hold of and utilise? Driven always to the point of madness. And then the insanity of drinking, which just kept me going in a circle of self-harm and self-destruction in the final days. So these days no longer doing that, and just making do with what is, and then looking at what my freedoms are. Sometimes they're big and wonderful, and sometimes there don't seem to be any freedoms at all. As life is, sometimes we get into a bind and then we find a way out. But the way I find my way out of most things these days, normally my thinking, is to include others, or be included in others' lives. So the fellowship of AA, although a nightmare scenario for me, proved to be the very thing that saved my life. A fellowship where nobody can tell you what to do, a fellowship with no rules, laws, regulations, a fellowship which is simply there to help people get sober. And this thing of anonymity, you can find out who you are and then share it with the rest of the world, and do it daily. Now, how wonderful is that? Well, not very wonderful if you're just starting out on the journey, because you're always looking for what's the get-out clause. And I remember in my early days where I used to go to meetings which were described as for people in later sobriety, over 8 years or over 9 years I used to go to these meetings, and see the people talking about how long they've been sober, and I had no clue really whether they were sober or not for that amount of time. I didn't believe them, and I thought after about 6 months there'll be a special inner sanctum where you can go back to drinking, and there is the last chance saloon has now become the first chance saloon again. So AA was my last chance saloon. It was the last place I ever thought I'd end up, and it was the last place I thought could help me, because I knew better. I knew everything there was to do with me and what made people tick, except one thing: how not to be an addict. Well, the truth is, once you're an addict, always an addict, in my view, but that's just my view. And one of the things I've learned in fellowship is it's the many voices in the fellowship of AA, not just one voice. There are no leaders. It's every voice has some weight, experience, strength and hope to share. And through that I learned how to be sober, just one day at a time, and life keeps on improving. Progress, not perfect. It's sort of imperfectly perfect, because I never know quite what might happen, and I don't know that I need fear it anymore. In fact, I know I need not fear life. What I need fear is my response to it sometimes. And these were things I've learned over the years. So my videos really are about what's happening on a daily basis, what helps me, how the 12-step program of AA for me to learn how to be open, honest and willing to live life without conditions, and how to be a part of fellowship in unity, service and recovery. And I share from this book, the Daily Reflections, which is an AA book, and it talks about the 12 steps of AA, and it talks about the 12, well, it doesn't talk, it shares through me reading it what are the 12 steps and how do they work, what are the 12 traditions and how do they work. So 12 months, 1 page a day, 1 step a month, 1 tradition a month. And on this little piece of card here, which is folded in 2, on the front is the AA preamble, depending on which way round you look at it. Inside it has the 12 steps of AA and the 12 traditions, which you can't read because my camera's not. Oh, there you can. 12 steps, 12 traditions, and I forget, I'm looking at it the other way round, trying to use a webcam. And on the back of it, it has something called the serenity prayer, which for anyone like me, where the word God is mentioned, always used to give me a feeling of disquiet and disconnectedness. After all, what had God ever done for me? And it really does depend on how we understand God, or how you understand God. For me, God is truth, love and wisdom, the higher power, if you like. Because inside me is opinion and belief. So I'm always looking to find out what the truth is. So I have opinion and belief, which is informed by truth. Love, what is love? How to love, be loved and useful. And wisdom, where does wisdom come from? Well, I learn wisdom, but I learn it from other people. So if God is truth, love and wisdom, pretty good for me as a definition. But in my life I've been atheist, agnostic and believer, depending on my life situation. So for the first part of my life I had no idea what God may be, except I heard the word God a lot. And atheist, agnostic, well, some people believe in God, some people don't believe in God, atheists and agnostics, not too sure apparently. So I've been all those things depending on what's happening to me. But we all use the word God in some way or other, and it has a meaning in our lives. So when I look at how does the fellowship of AA work for me, I'm looking for truth, love and wisdom in the moment of now. And if ever there was a God, it would be now, he, she or it. And truth, love and wisdom is what makes the world go round. Or not. If we don't have the truth, we don't understand love, and we have no wisdom. So the world is going to keep on going no matter what. So the world, providence, nature is God to me. But I can't define God, because if I could, I would be on equal status. And part of fellowship tells me I'm not the higher power, not even in my own life, but I do have freedom to choose, because we don't live alone. We live in society in some way or other. Even if we exclude ourselves from society, isolate, break down, and just can't operate within it, we're still impacted by it in some way or other. Otherwise we would starve to death and die. So better to join in, be included in some way, was my final conclusion as I came to the last days of drinking, where oblivion was preferred and not waking up probably was my goal. And somehow that moment of clarity, well, it can't get any worse, so why not give it a go? Find out from professionals what to do, how to get dry. And all the professionals said, why not go to AA, where they seem to be able to keep sober one day at a time? That's, after all, the only time scale you've got to live and operate in the moment of now, today. And that was a very difficult concept. Anyway, so my videos, these are the 12 steps, part of one a day. On this, I'm going to read out the AA preamble on here, because it reminds me what it can and cannot do, the fellowship. I don't represent it, never can, never will. As I say, full of unique, authentic people who are on their personal life journey, their path right now. And it's different to mine, but we have one similarity, a desire to be sober. So here is the AA preamble, which gives the game away, and why I was so reluctant to be a part of it to start with. Alcoholics Anonymous is a fellowship of men and women who share their experience, strength and hope with each other, that they may solve their common problem and help others to recover from alcoholism. So, one common problem, and help each other to recover, one day at a time. The only requirement for membership is a desire to stop drinking, so there are no rules, laws, regulations or leaders telling you what to do. There are no dues or fees for AA membership, so if you haven't got any money, come along anyway. We are self-supporting through our own contributions, so those of us who can afford to contribute, but only to a prudent reserve, never to make large piles of money available for years to come. It needs to be kept in the moment of now, so it only has enough. And the principle of having enough is where we start. Enough time to get sober, enough time to resolve our issues as we go along. AA is not allied with any sect, denomination, politics, organisation or institution. It does not wish to engage in any controversy, neither endorses nor opposes any causes. So as a fellowship, it has no other remit except one primary purpose. But every single person in AA has a view on life, opinions, affiliations, part of the cause, part of the religion, whatever it may be, or no religion. Everybody is affiliated to something or other, even if it's just a park bench, which was where I'd got to, nowhere else to go, or nowhere else to be. I just didn't fit anymore, and could not fit with that outlook which I had. So you will hear lots of things which are either good or bad around how to live, but the one similarity that we all have is to be sober. So if people get on your case and are being overly helpful or imposing their views on you, you can say thank you very much for your view and walk away. Or you can say, I'm very pleased for the information you've given me. I need walk away now and mind my own business, rather than say to them, bugger off and mind your own business and leave me alone. We learn a bit of humility. I need not be influenced by that person because their outlook is different to mine. But they are sober, so they may have something good to say. And that way we start to develop tolerance, not only for other people but ourselves and our own opinions and views, which were quite negative and didn't seem to help us get out of the problem, which was being an alcoholic and not able to stop drinking alcohol. So the primary purpose, our primary purpose, is to stay sober and help other alcoholics to achieve sobriety. Means that we share about it, and I share here, but I'm just one voice of many. And what I know more than anything is the many voices in the fellowship which are always going to make the difference. So if I rely on my own resources without consulting, I may find myself back in a problem where I box myself in because I don't know what the answers are. But if I stop being secretive and start sharing, which I did in fellowship, sharing beyond belief, so people tell me, then people know where I'm coming from, and they can give me advice or suggestions, or they can say, I've got a suggestion, would you like to hear it? And of course I would say yes, because I became more open. As secrets weren't keeping me stuck anymore in my own thinking, I could share, I'm feeling okay today, but this is bothering me. And if you imagine a group of people, one head is better than one, many voices in recovery, there are going to be some similarities there and some answers that other people have already found and how to help me. So that's how it works, sharing experience, strength and hope, but not imposing it. And the only thing to remember is, within the rooms and meetings, anonymity is sacrosanct, so that we can find out the truth of who we are without feeling under scrutiny from the outside world. So confidentiality and not gossiping about each other is of prime importance. So anonymity affords us the luxury to find out the truth of who we are, the first part of living, truth, rather than opinion and belief. And that's how it starts to work, and that's how it starts to work for me. So the daily reflection from this book, as I said, 12 steps. Step 10 in October the 3rd, the final day of the sunshine in London, UK for this year, I suspect, in terms of heat. But you never know, it might go on for another day. Anyway, AA daily reflection for today, October 3. Serenity after the storm. Someone who knew what he was talking about once remarked that pain was the touchstone of all spiritual progress. How heartily we AAs can agree with him. So what is spiritual progress? And, you know, a senior cleric said, when asked, what is spiritual, Mr. Senior Cleric? He replied, well, it's the ability to cope with reality, what's happening today, to cope with, not to be perfect at, to cope with making progress. So I quite like that, even though I'm not affiliated to any particular religion, and I don't know that I understand anything beyond that the world is a higher power than me. But it's out there, and the wisdom is out there. When on the roller coaster of emotional turmoil, I remember that growth is often painful, because growth is painful when we've been told, by the time you've done your exams, learn to read and write, and do your mathematics, and be able to operate your telephone and your computer, then you're fixed, aren't you? You know enough to keep on going. But the truth is that everything keeps on changing. Your telephone gets more difficult, mine do. Mine does so many things I can't possibly imagine how much time I would have to do them all. And my computer is beyond me in many respects, but I know enough to utilise it and get a message across. So everything's in the toolkit, if you like. And it is painful to keep on learning when you're supposed to know it all. By this time in your life, mister, you ought to know that, and you can actually say, well, actually, my life experience doesn't include what you're saying. So, fortunately for me, I don't mind learning more about it, and I know it's going to be painful. I know it's going to make me hot under the collar, and it's okay not to know. After all, if I'd known how to be sober, would I ever become an addict? Well, I don't know the answer to that, except that I am an addict in recovery, or an alcoholic in recovery, and here I go. So, when on the roller coaster of emotional turmoil, I remember that growth is often painful, because it makes me feel like I need to learn more, and it's quite difficult because I don't know where to start. My evolution in the AA program has taught me that I must experience the inner change, this inner change, however painful, that eventually guides me from selfishness to selflessness. If I am to have serenity, I must step my way past emotional turmoil and its subsequent hangover, and be grateful for continuing spiritual progress. And for me, that is in the past, when things didn't go right and I couldn't stand or cope with reality, I took a drink, and then many more until oblivion came. Especially when my heart was broken by the most beautiful girl in the world I was with at the time. And it wasn't her fault that my heart was broken. There was something wrong with me and how I was conducting myself, probably in the relationship. Or she was like me too, driven mad by trying to be perfect and still on to the next right thing, because it hadn't happened yet. Whatever it was supposed to happen hadn't happened. And if you've got two people busily thinking how it ought to be without really saying how we are, how are we feeling right now, why, what can we do, there's no empathy. So I've learned a little bit more on empathy, how to be with people, love them unconditionally. And that's working very well. It's working very well indeed, because it means I'm not trying to be anything but me. Anyway, my thoughts this morning. Life is a roller coaster in the moment of now, because we are all on a roller coaster, but how high and how low it goes depends on what's happening around us. Emotional and spiritual, these are the 12 steps. Knowing how I am feeling, emotional, and coping in the moment of now, spiritual. From age 5 to 45, I did have feelings, kept them to myself, and now you know everything, pretty much. And sometimes slowly, sometimes quickly, we make progress in the imperfectly perfect moment of now. Our mood and feelings impact on our thinking and actions today. So if I know how I'm feeling, my mood and feelings, if I know that where I'm coming from emotionally, I know how it's going to affect my thinking and my actions today. All feelings are good, this is my view. And if I know how I'm feeling, I do know the difference. Everything from shit to shinola plays its part today. And the American euphemism from shit to shinola, doesn't know the difference between shit and shinola, was for dim people who couldn't understand the difference, which would polish their shoes. So, emotionally, I didn't know shit from shinola most of the time during those drinking days, because I was always pushing them down or exploiting particular feelings of ecstasy and happiness, because I was in love with the right girl at last, until she left. And why shouldn't she? Or why shouldn't she have done that? Quite simply, quite right. Between 2005 2010, some other thinking and feeling, if you like. Last year, joyful and sad, pain and pleasure, right and wrong, yin and yang, seesaws and counterbalances. Balance appears to need a fine edge, or we swing to extremes. Yes, life happens sometimes stormy and sometimes calm, and then we have choices around all those things. And as we accept life is difficult, we find what is possible in recovery with help, support and challenge today. Again, last year, pain and pleasure are touchstones. We may prefer life back to be black and white. Experience teaches us life happens in colour. If we do the right thing, we expect the right outcome, is the question. There is the expectation and the resentment under construction. No one deserves, nothing is predictable. We feel life sober as it is today. So if we're not expecting it to be a certain way, if I set my expectations, and I sort of do this mentally in my own head, expectations 0. If something interesting happens, good. If something sad happens, that's also good, because I can feel it now. Darn it, this emotional spiritual program works. It makes me, no, it doesn't make me, it allows me, enables me to feel what's going on for me, and then what to do about it. So feelings first for me, thinking second. But for a lot of people, they will feel it differently. They will suggest they can think it first and then feel it. Well, it's a bit like chicken and egg, isn't it? If we know where we're coming from, our thinking is better balanced, and so therefore we will feel better balanced as an outcome of the actions we take. Does it matter? Well, as long as you understand where your feelings are, and what they are, and what to do about it, what actions can be taken in the moment of now, today, not tomorrow. So, a letter to a friend, grief and closure. Somebody was asking me about grief and closure last year, or a year before that. They wrote some very kind words to me, and they were appreciated. Life is always difficult, until we accept it is the way it is. And that was something that M. Scott Peck said in his book The Road Less Travelled. And in his obituary it said, M. Scott Peck, the chain-smoking gin-sodden philanderer, died today at the age of 69. And actually I'll be very lucky to get there, because I've got some chronic ailments. But that's not the issue. Today's okay. And although he was a chain-smoking gin-sodden philanderer, in that first sentence in that book where he said life is difficult, if we accept that it's difficult and then work out what we can and cannot do, and we have 12 steps if you're an addict or an alcoholic, 12 steps to keep us sober, the can do, can't do, and learning the wisdom is far easier than it ever was before. One other matter which I realise you may be dealing with is loss. My dad gone many years now. I loved him dearly and cherished him, and was never able to share this truth with him, mainly because I was just like him, a product of my upbringing and cut off from my feelings a lot of the time. And his last 3 months he sort of unravelled when his feelings came out. The fear was lost. It was okay to let go of the secrets, and he stopped drinking and smoking. And he was very lovable and to be cherished, and he taught me a lot in those last 3 months about how I might learn life again. The good news is I talk to him now, talk about him to family. We share a lot about how awful he was and how awful his life turned out, because he had an awful start and it went from bad to worse, it sort of seemed. And in many ways how wonderful he was too. He died about 3 months sober after being diagnosed as terminal. We hear the word closure often. Yeah, this is me speaking to me as much as anybody. I don't feel we need closure. We need understanding for how we became who we are today. And our ancestors had everything to do and how we turned out. I don't blame my dad for anything these days, or feel angry that he's gone. Actually, he's gone. He's not gone or dead, really. He lives on in his children, me being one of them. I talk to my dad from time to time, usually when I'm alone, laugh and cry, and see how life is in these conversations. Because he had a lot of wisdom, based on the fact that he had such a rough life and hard life, and didn't know how to deal with it. It is part of living, our cherishing and loving and having memories, some awful, as I said, and some wonderful too. And I see a lot of denial and closure. I'm closing down now because I ought to. And that's about grief too. Grief is coming out of the utter awfulness of loss and desolation into a place where we can cherish what has been and make that experience part of life. People with grief, people with a firm belief in God, have conversations with God. I have no firm understanding of anything about God. I can't describe or I can't define God, because then I would have to be sort of similar sized in intellect and all the rest of it, if there is one. And seeing as I can't define the next minute, let alone how nature works, how the universe works, then I need not have that dialogue anymore. Do I need to believe or not believe? Well, I can certainly believe there are greater powers than me, vast indeed. Just the collective wisdom of humanity is a good starting point. What I do understand is we have a conscience and an inner voice which is always with us. So some people call it the chattering committee in our head, or the single voice, which is it's okay to be me. And then what to do about it? Help people. The inner voice is, if you like, a dialogue we have about our daily life. If there is a God and a hereafter, we can access this wisdom, because it's all around us, it's written, it's etched into us as life goes on. My dad, for all his faults, wanted the best for us, as does the inner voice, and whatever it may be connected to. And my inner voice is connected to the greater wisdom of humanity, I hope, and beyond, if that is so. I don't have to debate it anymore. But in the early days, it was good to talk about God and, how can God possibly influence what's going on right now? Well, certainly the collective wisdom of the world can. In my own way, I feel conscience, the inner voice. I feel conscience, and the inner voice speaks with our feelings, love being the main voice we hear, or lack of it. Our conscience and inner voice want the best for us. If we ask the questions about what next, share our fears and faith in making the best choices we can, based on our real life situation, we find peace in our next actions. No guarantees, because life on earth is subject to nature and providence. So although we may have a good idea of which direction we might want to go in, there might be a blockage. Normally our own thinking about, I can't do this, it's too big. But if we ask for help, in whatever shape or form it comes, usually through wisdom from others, or the inner voice which says, listen, pal, you're on the wrong track here, about time to get off. So, meditation and prayer are not exclusive to those who are religious. Meditation and prayer is the dialogue we have with the universe, a way of seeing the world we live in. Everything we are and everything we love. Love is eternal, no past tense. Everything lives on, in some shape or form. That was quite profound, whenever that was. So what does it mean in step 10 for today? If it's going okay, I'm less likely to be checking out what's going on for me, which can be difficult, because if I'm just going off helter-skelter on that roller coaster and don't know why, and I haven't done any thinking or meditation, I could be heading for a brick wall. Or if I've done a bit of prayer and meditation about how is the world, how am I going to connect today, how is unconditional love going to be part of my life, how am I feeling, why, what can I do to love, be loved and useful, unconditional. Am I going to take myself out of the equation in terms of how I am in the world? To an extent, yes. To an extent, no. But selflessness, sharing experience, strength and hope, and the spot check inventory, step 10, means that if something is disturbing me too much or is at an extreme, I can say, hang on a minute, how am I feeling, why, and what am I doing? Am I looking at the world and judging it as being wrong, or am I looking at the world and saying, what is my part in it right now? I'm merely a player, I'm part of it, or am I helping people or not helping people? Is my next remark going to be helpful or sharp and nasty? All those things. So it's not about just me and my outlook. I don't deserve anything, actually, other than hopefully an opportunity to be a part of what is going on. And I cannot rule it my way because I've worked hard and I've done this and I've done that. It's not like that. Ask anybody who's having a struggle right now, is it fair? No. Is it the way it is? Probably. And we can do some things around that, often to let go of what we cannot sustain, so we make room, stop hanging on to things which are killing us, basically, or causing us such stress that it's no longer useful, it's distressful and horrible. So I started with drink, and one of the things I know more than anything, if I understand my needs are met, roof over my head, porridge in the cupboard, wants can be let go of. I want a new camera, I'd like a bigger TV, my computer's breaking down, what can I do? All those things can become nagging doubts. If it's still working, good. But if it needs maintenance, and the person who needs maintenance, or the thing in my life which needs maintenance daily is me, because my outlook can go right out the window. Anyway, the can do, can't do bit at the end of my videos, it's on the back of that card. It's one of the most useful piece of cards I've ever had in all my life. A preamble which puts context of what is sobriety, how to share about it. And don't forget, I don't represent AA, never can, never will. It's the many voices in the programme which make the difference, the ones which give you the similarities and wisdom to find that sober path, and then life blossoms again into horror sometimes because it's horrible, and joy because it's joyful, just as life can be. We can be in the moment of now. So that serenity prayer on the back, to God or to a higher power of your understanding, it's what works in your life. You don't have to adopt a God that you don't understand. You don't have to change your religious views at all. And you can still be agnostic, atheist or believer as life experiences show you what is going on. So when I talk about courage, faith and confidence, often it's courage, faith and confidence in the next right step with help from higher powers than me. So that serenity prayer can do, can't do. Can change me, my attitudes and behaviour, and get help. Can't do. I'm not here to change you, your attitudes and behaviour. That's up to you and how you want to live. So I can change me, I can't change you, and the wisdom to know the difference is often in the moment of now. So the serenity prayer, abbreviated or as it is on this card, it says, God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Always for me, in the moment, and just for today.